Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stream. I'm Vio Corva. You can call me V. And yeah, tomorrow my fourth book, The Beautiful Decay, will be published and out in the world for anyone to buy and read or borrow and read. Um, it's pretty wild. This is only my second ever book launch. My first book launch was actually for my second book and my third book, I suppose. And we played hide and seek in the game Feral as little cats. But this time, I'm afraid that's not an option, so we're going to be doing a quiz, which I spent most of today making, if I'm not going to lie. It's not a very long quiz, but it takes a really long time to both come up with trivia and then fact check it and then get it all set up, so yeah, so I'm looking forward to doing that. Hello and welcome to Rowan and Story Dragon and Maliki and to Joe and gosh, and to Dave, and to the Nine-Tailed System, and to Tula, and to say Maliki, and to Fluffy, and Alatheride, and Jabal, and Katie Shee, and Satnosk. Oh my gosh, hi, welcome. Uh, Thank you so much for being here. I've had such a big fear of I've planned this whole thing and no one's gonna come. And so you all being here is just absolutely wonderful. Um, Rowan says, I have never done a book launch party 17 books in. You have so many amazing books. We should do a book launch for the next one. If you want to, anyway. I have to say, the in-person ones I've heard about haven't been that amazing. But I've really enjoyed the digital ones. But it is definitely more work than not doing it, so... Maliki says, I just woke up from a nap to be here. I appreciate it. That's a big deal, getting away from a nap just to come here. Right. Dave says, you have a lot to live up to here, V. This isn't Spyro. Look, Spyro will be back as usual soon. Today, I'm just gonna read a bit and chat a bit, and we're gonna do a quiz. So... Maliki says, might not be able to do quiz because having dinner. That's totally fine. The quiz will be playable on mobile and desktop, just on the stream. But you don't even have to actually officially participate. That's fine. But, Dave says, having been to a couple of in-person ones, it's all about the people and the vibe. Good communities make for a good time. Yeah, I guess maybe the authors who I've spoken to about it just didn't have, weren't given the best kind of situation. They didn't have the community there, maybe. I don't know. Anyway. Alright. So, Sam can't stay. Thank you so much for coming, Sam. Thank you so much. Yeah, okay. So what we're going to start with is, I will do a reading. Katie says, did Feral go to the blockchain dark side? Feral, which is the game that my previous book launch party was held in, was sunset in order to take all of the assets and turn it into an NFT, which, as you might imagine, was incredibly unpopular. That NFT game has since gone offline, so all the people who bought NFTs in it have just been scammed the way everyone who buys NFTs are scammed. So, yeah, it was so grim. It was entirely... Nobody in the community was happy about it. It was awful. So, yeah, that was a big disappointment. I would have held this there otherwise. Because I'm all for turning into cats and dragons and playing hide and seek. But anyway. Alright, I'm gonna read the first chapter of The Beautiful Decay. This is the second book in the Toontown series. There is some minor spoilers for the first book. But nothing too big, I don't think. So, and it's just the first chapter. So if you'll just bear with me, I will get going. Chapter 1. Uster. Deep beneath the dead mountains, in a secret and sprawling necropolis that smelled of dust and carried the chill of death, a woman with colourless eyes and a long trailing gown of black lace snorted and jerked upright, knocking over the complicated array of bobbins and partially knit lace on the table in front of her. Shit, she said with quiet fervour. scooping up the now tangled mess. An undead creature swayed in the doorway, breath rattling in and out in long, rasping gasps. Dark purple flesh peeked from the rag strips encasing it, obscuring all but the dark hole of its mouth and a trailing plait of dark hair. It raised its hand again, preparing to scratch at the open door. "Yes, yes, I'm awake, Misery darling," said the woman. Her name was Usta of the Ashes. She was in her mid-20s, tall and with slate-coloured skin that was once a warm brown black. Now necromancy had tinged it a grey-black. Her hair was pulled into neat box braids, their smooth shape making the sharpness of her cheekbones all the more dramatic. Around her waist was a ropey belt of treated intestine. But most shocking were her colourless eyes, with only the faintest line ringing her irises. She set about trying to untangle her lace bobbins and set them back the way they'd been before. After a moment she sighed and shunted them across the table. "Morin's teeth!" She rubbed her eyes. "Ugh, it'll take me an age to fix that." Usta stood up, wincing at the soreness in her back and legs. She stretched, shoulders cracking. "I suppose she snuck in like a little cockroach," she said to Misery. The minion sighed, which could mean anything. She went to her housemate's door and rapped on it irritably. "Get up! The sun-eye's been up for hours, and—" The door swung open. Stale air greeted her. Usta gazed at that empty, book-strewn room solemnly, then closed the door without another word. She washed in icy mountain water stored in a cistern above her tub, and emerged shivering in robes of dark purple fabric with lace cuffs. She pulled her box braids into a long tail and turned to a shard of mirror in one of the sconces of the main room. There, her own tired, unmade-up face stared back at her. She bared her teeth at herself before she ran kohl carefully around her eyes and painted her lips black. She bared her teeth again. "Good. Less like a wounded animal, more like the animal that did the wounding," she said. There was a small chirp and bump at her legs. She looked down and her expression softened. A stocky, short-haired cat with black patches gazed up at her, kneading on the stone floor with stumbling paws. The cat's scarred little face was split half in half between white and black. She had a collar around her neck so saturated with runes and wards that it glowed. Usta knelt and scooped up the cat. The warmth of a living creature had once been startling to her, but now it was as reassuring as the cat's gravelly rumble. "That's right, Dichotomy. We ought to leave or we won't be on time for the town meeting. Or, God forbid, late." As she squished her cat's ear, the cat purred and dribbled happily, then bit her hand, drawing blood. Usta didn't flinch. "Well, that's enough petting then, if you're going to be rotten about it." She put Dichotomy down and swept toward the door. The cat followed, still purring and dashing around her legs. "Misery, darling, it's time to go." She put her hand on the door, then stopped when there was no response. She glanced over her shoulder. "Misery?" Misery sighed. She stood in the corner of the kitchen, staring at the wall with her back to the world. "Come on, darling. You know I can't leave you here." Misery shifted, leaning her head against the wall. As she did every day, Usta considered leaving her minion home. After all, Misery was a house minion. She had no liking for the outside world. But even as she thought it, she remembered flames and a drenched blanket and the horrible choking taste of smoke and ash. "Come on," she clapped her hands. She didn't put any necromancy into it. It was rare that she used magic to command this particular minion. Reluctantly, Misery shuffled away from the wall and followed Usta out the door, her head hung low and her arms hanging limp. "Good," said Usta. "And I see you've been listening to me about your posture as well. Much better." She locked up her home, waiting for the comforting feel of her wards locking into place, before setting off for the town hall. Dichotomy wove about her legs and darted ahead, only to come trotting back again. She seemed as reluctant to let Usta out of her sight. And no wonder. When Usta had found her, she'd been a stray cat lost in the crypt, dodging undead and giant spiders, and subsisting on tomb rats. "Misery, keep up!" Usta called over her shoulder. She looked back at her minion lagging behind with tiny, shuffling steps, and held in a growl of frustration. "Misery, darling, we'll be late at this rate." She walked back and tucked her minion's rag-wrapped arm firmly around her own. It was icy cold and might have burned an upwelder, but Uster was deep enough into the craft that the chill barely registered. "They have to declare a new council member now, surely," she said. Her voice quavered and then held. She banished the image of Rhee's empty room from her mind. "I know those pompous bastards love to hang on to their power with only the three of them. But with only the three of them, how are they supposed to make any decisions?" Misery sighed in what Uster thought was a supportive way. "I'm going to call for the empty council seats to be filled," Uster continued. "There were 7 once, and there should be 7 again. Morin herself blessed it. We can't continue letting everything decay. No offence, darling." She glanced at Misery, who rolled her eyes. She couldn't tell whether that was out of sarcasm, or whether she'd just lost control of them. Uster inclined her head to other denizens as she passed. Some were outside their tomb homes enjoying the morning must and mist. A few others seemed to be making their way to the town hall early, as she was. She kept her back straight and her expression imperious, as if it were perfectly normal to take one's house minion for a stroll to the town meeting. She repressed the twinging thought that she wouldn't feel so uncomfortable if Rhee had been here as they'd planned. Rhee never seemed to be around any more. As they hit the end of the street, Uster enjoyed the familiar sight of the central mausoleum, or Tombtown proper. Though she often resented that her tomb home was so far from the centre where the council members and other important denizens resided, she secretly loved the view from this high-up street before she descended the stairs, with all of the town laid out in stone, shadow, and fractured sunlight. Once an enormous collection of individual tombs beneath a great domed ceiling, now those tombs had been converted into grim stone houses and businesses still engraved with the names of the dead once interred there. Uster glanced up at the domed ceiling. Cracks in it let through trickles of water or glimmers of distant light that flashed in her dark sight. A comforting reminder that this place was home, and hidden from those upwelders that would destroy her kind. But not without an ache at the memory of warm sunlight on her face, the scent of fresh air, the feel of grass beneath her feet. Even as distant and faded as those memories were, they could still bite. They passed down spidery stairs and into the square, taking them slowly so that Misery wouldn't trip. The market was as bustling as ever, perhaps less a few stalls than usual today. It was always busy at the market on town meeting days, as much for gossip as for shopping. "Bone flutes for sale! Bone flutes!" Mazarin the Bold shouted raspily from his usual bone stall. He was a weedy necromancer with a slight hunch, wispy hair, and visible fangs. He'd been a fixture of the market for as long as Uster had lived here. "Good for occupying kids and banishing ghouls, or the other way around." Uster would have glided past, but Dichotomy trotted over to Mazarin and started twining about his legs. "Oh, there's a good cat. No, I won't pet you. I know you'll only savage me. Here, I've got some nice smoked cave fish just for you." Dichotomy continued to twine about his legs until the fish was dropped, at which point she growled and sprinted away with fish in mouth to hide behind some crates. Mazarin watched her go with a bemused expression, then caught Uster's stare. "Oh, it's all perfectly safe, I swear. Deboned and all. She always comes a-begging for my lunch, and cats are good luck." Uster was torn a moment between her desire to be first to the town meeting and this nagging sense of debt. She stopped at Mazarin's stall. "Do you have a zick-scry knuckle?" she asked, as casually as she could. "Mine is getting worn out and won't roll properly." That's a danger bone. Must have a lot of excitement in your future, eh?" Uster didn't deign to answer. Mazarin handed her the knuckle bone, and she dropped 3 large gold coins onto the stall top. Mazarin raised his eyebrows. Though gold was plentiful among the denizens, 3 coins was still a vast overpayment for a replacement knuckle bone. She avoided his questioning gaze and went to wait until her cat emerged from behind the crate, licking her chops with a much satisfied expression. "All done?" Dichotomy flicked her tail, staring at Uster. "Well, come on then." As they walked, she considered her cat. A cat minion would be much prized in Tombtown, particularly as cats were so hard to come by in a crypt. She'd spelled all kinds of wards and curses into Dichotomy's collar to protect her from other practitioners who might prefer her undead to alive, and she rarely let the cat out unsupervised. It had never occurred to her that any of her neighbours might be kind to her, and indeed Mazarin had seemed quite familiar with her. "I suppose I know where you disappear to when you ran out of the house, Uster said. All those times I was imagining you caught in a giant spider's web. Dichotomy sniffed a door rather than respond. They came at last to the towering black iron doors that gated the old king's tomb, now used as the town hall. They'd been opened enough to let through a few denizens at a time, but nobody was walking in currently. Look at that, Uster said. We're still early, in spite of our little detour. She laid a hand on the cold metal surface of the door, thinking of Ree. Ree had seen this place not as an ancient ruin, but an active throne room, had knelt before the now nameless king, and learnt him to be a cruel tyrant. It was still wild to Uster that it could be true, that her friend had been cast into the past by an ancient lich, and been brought back only by Uster's magic. Did Ree still think about that when she passed through these doors? Or did her experience of the present outweigh the heft of memories past? If she was here, Uster might ask. But she was never here. Uster took her hands from the door, drew a long breath, and straightened. Miss Ree, darling, keep an eye on Dichotomy for me. And don't leave the town hall. I'm going to sit up front so the council can see me glaring. She took one last look around, thinking perhaps her friend might come running up, looking tired and travel-worn, then squared her shoulders and went inside. The town hall was empty. The dais holding the old king's sarcophagus was devoid of council members, as were the marble stairs leading up to it. The rows of rickety chairs, some of which were now well on their way to being firewood, were largely uninhabited as well. Except for old Uzma Plaguebringer, who dozed in the back with her rat minions curled up on her shoulders and lap. She'd likely arrived hours ago to light the torch sconces that lined the walls. The once grand hall was now worn and dilapidated, though with patches of shiny newness that were a constant reminder of the terrible ritual that had almost been completed here, exchanging the modern town and desert denizens for the necromantic kingdom of old. The torchlight cast long and angry shadows across the hall, glinting off the neatly organised treasure at the back, treasure which belonged to the town and could be claimed by any denizen with the council's blessing. Uster took a seat at the front, carefully sweeping her skirts so that they'd fan out as she sat. She crossed her arms and frowned up at the dais. A swirling storm of screaming spirits and icy winds, the eerie glow of a growing portal. It had been 8 years since Chandri and Smythe had been exiled from Toontown, and she still couldn't look at those stairs without seeing it, without remembering the feeling of air being sucked from her lungs, remembering dragging herself up those steps to stop the man she'd come to think of as a friend from killing her. She hadn't made it, of course. Nobody had made it. Not the council, not the high priestess of Morin, not even the lich, the most powerful necromancer of the crypt, and several centuries old. Their only saving grace had been that Smythe had excluded Ree from his spell, and thus she had been able to climb the steps and stop him, along with Wandering Larry, the crypt's oldest and most gormless minion. She rubbed her chest and looked away, letting her pulse settle back down. Smythe was gone, and good riddance to him. Just another in a long line of people who had betrayed her. The town hall filled in trickles and spurts, necromancers filing in, either in small groups or edging for lonely seats at the back. She kept an ear out for rumours and subtly took a pinch of grave mould from a pouch at her hip, summoning an invisible spectre to be her eyes and ears at the back. It had taken her years to get her spectres to be fully invisible. For a long time she'd been able to hide everything but the glow of their ghostly eyes, but now it was so complete that it was rare that she got caught spying. She listened, with her own ears first, to the rows nearest her. "Have you seen old Ursula?" asked Etheria Eversworn. "She swore bloody vengeance on me when I bumped into her the other week, but my mushroom garden is completely untouched. It's not like her." "Heard you gone fishing," replied another denizen. She wasn't sure who. A man, most likely. Fishing referred to searching the crypt for corpses to raise as minions, or feral undead to master. "Well, I'll keep an eye out. She's a hateful old ghoul, but I worry about her." Uster shifted her senses to her spectre, now hovering far enough above the back rows that the practitioners wouldn't sense its cold and know themselves to be watched. She rubbed her eyes at the cold itch as her vision transferred to her spectre, hoping that, as far forward as she was, nobody would notice a ghostly glow in her own colourless eyes. "Didn't see them when I scryed," said a teen practitioner with their hair shaved on the sides and plaited on top. They probably don't want you spying on them, said another teen. You know how Elle is about scrying, emergency only. Saw a strange little shroom while out with dead Percy, said an older practitioner, fondly patting his undead dog. The dog panted silently, its fleshless skull devoid of tongue. I wanted to pick it and bring it home for my son's collection, but something spooked Percy and he went herring off. Yeah, I heard there might be ghouls in those parts. Nothing particularly interesting. A feud between two practitioners had led to the first bannings at the Bone and Brew in a long time. Someone had stolen some treated organs from one of their neighbours. Nothing big enough to sink her teeth into. She sifted through the conversations, bored and a little irritated by the wind-like whooshing that accompanied sitting in her spectre's head. Something groaned piteously. A familiar groan, followed by the faintest yowl. Usta sighed and massaged her temples, ejecting from her spectre's senses. Go help Misery with the cat, would you? She murmured, and sensed her spectre go to do her bidding. She looked around, blinking a few times to refocus her eyes and clear any residual glow. The town hall was nearly full now, and the council had begun their procession up the aisle to the dais. Kylath Bane at the front, her robes dusty and dreary, but a cut of vibrant red paint across her lips. Igneous the Undying behind her, looking like someone had drained all the colour from his skin and dipped his long hair in ink. Taranta behind him, naked and hairless from the waist up, but for the tattoos crowding his skin. All of them moved with a kind of ritual pace that made Usta roll her eyes. She supposed they thought it gave them gravitas, but honestly it just made her feel impatient. Nobody was really paying them attention anyway. When they got to the dais, they all stood behind the sarcophagus as if it were a particularly long lectern, and Igneous stomped his staff with a boom, amplifying the council's voices across the hall. Under Moran's blessing we survive another week in this bounteous crypt, he said. He launched into his usual self-important blather, which Usta listened to with narrowed eyes. Front row again, Usta. Ever the dutiful denizen. Usta startled at the familiar voice and eerie tone. She hadn't noticed the high priestess of Moran slip into the seat beside her. Apparently she'd once been a huntress. Perhaps that was where Ree had inherited her creepy stillness and silent movement. Arthura raised her eyebrows while she watched her husband address the town hall. Wait for me after the meeting, she said quietly. We have much to discuss. Usta inclined her head, trying to hold in her nervous apprehension. Something about Arthura's manner made her feel that it was more than an invitation to dinner with the family. The meeting went on. Kylath took over from Igneous, taking complaints and solving disputes between denizens, practitioners fighting over fishing rights in certain tombs, neighbourly disputes about minions tearing up each other's mushroom gardens, that sort of thing. Once Usta would have been hanging on every word, scheming for the day when she would be the one the denizens came to for advice. Those dreams had crumbled with maturity. The council was nepotistic and near immortal, and she no longer desired power over others. She wanted purpose, and that was something altogether different and entirely more difficult to find. So when Taranta interrupted proceedings to call for volunteers to be part of some grand expedition, Usta only raised her eyebrows. Taranta sidled to the front of the dais, steepling his bony fingers. Prestige awaits, he said, as well as necromantic discoveries such as we have never seen before. I vow that all who accompany me will receive my special thanks. He nearly hissed the last word, a sound that tickled Usta's ear unpleasantly. People started shouting back their questions and responses, some complaining about the vagueness of the offer, others asking when it would start and what form the thanks might take. Usta tuned out of it, focusing instead on the other council members' reactions. Igneous looked disapproving. Kylath harried. Interesting. When the meeting ended, the town hall gradually emptied except for a few denizens here and there, and a clump of eager practitioners around Taranta who basked in the attention. Not drawn by the prestige, Arthura murmured beside her. Usta glanced at the priestess. As ever, she wore a cassock of plain brown sackcloth, but wore it so regally it might have been silk. Her bare feet poked from the bottom, pale and neat. Her mane of ash-coloured hair had been wrestled into a loose tail that even now it fought to free itself from. Not particularly, Usta said. It takes more than vague promises of a pat on the head to pique my interest. She didn't say that sometimes it felt like nothing piqued her interest these days. that she clung to her house minion and her cat because it seemed like there was nothing else for her. That some days she looked forward to visiting the altar of many gods to make an offering to Morin, simply because it was nice to think that anyone was listening. Those kinds of thoughts were unworthy of a practitioner of her stature. Nonetheless, when she met Arthura's ice-chip eyes, she could not help but feel pierced by them. Like she was made of glass, and her thoughts floated around inside of her, for Arthura to examine as she pleased. "Of course," said Arthura, her tone entirely too mild. She stood and smoothed her cassock. "Come join me at the altar," she said. "Though Morin sees all, some things are best discussed right in front of her." "Sorry, what is this about?" Arthura's expression was very grave. "It is about you, Usher of the Ashes. It is about your fate." And that's the first chapter. Sorry, that, was longer than expected. I haven't actually read that since before I started the publishing process, so that was really nice to return to. Thank you all for listening. I'm not going to be able to catch up to everything that's here, but I could see a few things here, like Rowan saying Rhea and Uster trying to be friends and not doing a very good job of it. Yep, it's just been 8 years of them still failing to be good friends. Quirrell's pointed out the skeleton dog. Thank you all so much. Dave says, can we talk about that cover art, by the way? So dynamic. That cover art is by Dona Vajgand. She is absolutely incredible. You can find her on Mastodon at Dona at mastodon.art. And at, I think it's donavajgand.neocities.com is her website. She was an absolute delight to work with. Absolutely incredible cover. I couldn't be happier with it. Rowan says, Uster and Rhea at the end of book 1. Okay, we have definitely decided we are friends now. Yes, and then they completely failed to really live up to that. Yeah, thank you all so much for listening. So I guess it's time for a short quiz. Anyone who wasn't here at the beginning of the stream, I put together a quiz today. I definitely left it too late to be doing it. This should just come from my head, so if I am wrong, I fact-checked things before I put them in the quiz, but any inaccuracies are down to me. So the situation is, if I stop this quiz, where is the things? Basically, if you would like to engage with the quiz, there an overlay will come up that you'll be able to interact with on your screen. If you click on the symbol for Quiz Kit, which is just coming up in just a moment, you will be able to hang on. There we go. It should be visible now. There should be some rules on the screen. If you enable access for this quiz, if you hover over the symbol, which I think is at the top of your screen on mobile, and top right maybe on desktop, you will find that you can enable access, which will enable your Twitch name to be used in the point scoring. So and the quiz works in this way where if you have the highest amount of points at the end, you win. Correct answers give you points. Faster answers give you more points. Incorrect answers remove points. And no answer has no effect. So it's okay just not to answer if you don't know. Now, I'm hoping that this will work. I don't know what the latency is going to be like for you. You should have 30 seconds per question, which was the maximum this extension allowed. But it may be less if you're on a particularly long delay. I don't know. We will see. At the end of each question, I will then reveal the answer. We'll take a moment to discuss that, I guess, to a minor degree, and then we'll move on. There will be 30 questions. All right, so if everyone has enabled access so that if you win, we'll know you've won. Otherwise, you'll be an anonymized name and we won't know who it was. I will get started. So, yeah, let's go. A real-world example of necromancy is grave digging, deathbed vigil, embalming, or seance? So, for the theme of this quiz is obviously necromancy themed. It's a little bit loose because it's sort of more kind of Toontown related in that sense. But if you are unable to play in the extension, you are very welcome to just kind of answer along at home. Your points just won't turn up, that's all. Okay, time is up. Story Dragon says won't be able to do it logged in. Oh, I'm sorry. I hope that's worked for some people. So the answer we have here, seance. So grave digging is not in any way involved with undead. Neither is a death vigil or embalming. Embalming being preparing a body for the afterlife, but not for any kind of undeath. Whereas a seance is supposed to be contacting the spirits of the dead. So that is more necromantic. That is not just a death ritual. All right. Working perfectly for Dave. Love that. Maliki says, I realized after I voted. I was a little tricky with some of these. Some more than others. Fluffy says, I haven't done a quiz for a long time and it's really fun. I'm really glad. This took me a really long time to put together for such a simple quiz. Which of these is a god of the dead? Artemis, Shiva, Freya, or Osiris? Tula says, I didn't even know that word. That's completely understandable. Also, anyone who's using, has English as a second language, or as an additional language, is probably going to find this a little bit more difficult when it's, like, specific terms. Now, these are gods from different pantheons in different parts of the world. Tula says English is like my third language. Exactly. That's understandable. So, the correct answer was Osiris. And basically everyone got that. So, Artemis is the Greek goddess of the hunt. Shiva is the Hindu god of the destroyer. Freya is the Norse goddess of love and war. Siberia says, when Shiva gets involved, death is the least of your worries. Absolutely. Shiva's got a lot more going on. Osiris is one of the Egyptian gods of death. I believe replacing Anubis somewhat in role. I thought Anubis might be too easy, so I went with Osiris instead. Maliki says, oh, I was correct, I was confused. We love it, a confused correct answer. That's the best kind. All right. Our next question coming up. Dayface is puppy god, Anubis is puppy god. Absolutely. Story says, I got this one. The only one I hadn't heard of was Shiva. That's wonderful. Nine says it's a big thing. The thing with ancient Egyptian pantheons, it changed a lot over time. Absolutely. It's a fun pantheon for sure. Sati says Freya is technically also a death god. She gets half of Odin's dead warriors. I do know that, but I don't think she is considered particularly to have a domain over death. So I'm not going to feel bad about it because nobody did vote Freya. Everyone went Osiris, but you are quite right. Jabal says, if I recall correctly, Anubis kind of judges the dead more and Osiris rules and embodies them more. Definitely. Anubis is more of a judger, more of like slightly more of a psychopomp kind of role as well. We'll move on. Quirrell says, Anubis is just this guy, you know? Yeah, Anubis is just this guy. Can you move the overlay up? I cannot, I'm afraid. I cannot mess with this overlay. I don't know exactly what it's going to do, and I was told that this is where it goes. So this is how the app works. I'm sorry about that. It's covering chat. Yeah. Rude. I'm sorry. You'll just be like slightly delayed on chat. All right, next question. What is the original meaning of necromancy? Raising the dead, remembering the dead, communicating with the dead, or controlling the dead? Jabal says Anubis and Zaphod being just this guy since some time. We're pulling hitchhikers into the Egyptian pantheon at the moment. Dave says this one's tough. I love to hear it. The meaning of necromancy has sort of changed over time, or certainly in usage. Now, if people wanna kind of challenge this when we get the correct answer, we'll see. So, a correct answer was communicating with the dead. Necromancy's original meaning, and which I think is still technically the meaning, is so summoning or communing with spirits, particularly in order to divine, usually, to predict the future, to gain future knowledge. It's a divination thing, not not like a magic undead thing. Necromancy has come to mean that through things like The Lord of the Rings and Dungeons and Dragons and kind of that kind of modern fantasy. So the modern definition would be probably raising the dead. But remembering, controlling the dead, probably also more of a modern thing. But communicating with the dead, that is what it originally meant. So, all right. This is going pretty well. Jabal says, my favorite sort is gyromancy, telling the future by getting someone to walk in circles until they fall over and seeing which way they fall. Is that a real thing? Because that's delightful. All right. Moving on. That's an actual thing. Holy crap. That's so fun. I used to do that all the time. So, which of these Pokemon is Ghost type? Houndoom, Murkrow, Grimmsnarl, or Poltegeist? This is not going to be a 100% grown-up quiz. This is what has come out of my brain. So expect video games and books and films as well. Zatnos says, what a dark, dark question. I feel like you're going to get this right. Story Dragon says, just guessing here, don't know Pokemons. The nice thing about Pokemon is that if you can kind of get it from the puns sometimes, so which is why I've chosen ones that are a little bit more difficult. Jabal says, I'm suddenly totally out of my depth. You're okay with all these historical sort of questions. Suddenly, Pokemon. Alright, the correct answer is Poltegeist. Houndoom, Murkrow, and Grimmsnarl are all dark-type Pokemon. Which you might think Dark and Ghost would be like the same type. But no, those are two different kinds of Pokemon that are all very similar. It's just like Dark-type Pokemon are mean, and Ghost-type Pokemon are undead and steal the souls of children. That's Pokemon. Poltegeist is a pun on poltergeist, a kind of ghost. It is literally a pot of tea that's a ghost. And if you drink it, it's poison. Dave says, I thought that name was too obvious. Nope. Those are all real Pokemon names. Story Dragon, you got it? Jabal got it? See? Joe says it was so obvious I clicked Houndoom straight away. Joe, you have captured Poltegeist in a Pokemon game. I watched it happen. Next question. In Vio Corva's Toontown series, the primary deity of necromancers is Morin, the Root Father, Merca, or Alariel. So, only people who have read my books will get this, and frankly, some people still might not get it, because that's kind of like lore. There will be a couple questions from my book, but it is not the majority of the quiz. Coral says, this was in chapter 1 just now, so shh. No clues. Yes, hopefully you will get it, but if you don't, that's completely fine. 100% got Morin, yeah. Morin the Undying, the goddess with a hole through her head, is the goddess of necromancers. The Root Father, Merca, and Alariel, however, are all deities in Toontown that have been mentioned to a greater or lesser degree. They have all explicitly come up. All right. Moving on. In the 1998 PlayStation game Medieval, Sir Daniel Fortescue's default weapon is his bone sword, his boot, his bite, or his arm. This is a bit of a deep dive. I'll be honest with you. I only vaguely remember this game, but it did leave an impression on me. It left a big impression on me. Tula remembers this game? Coral says the arrow fodder who fell at the first charge. No idea for this question, Fluffy? Well, hopefully you'll have a bit more work on the Toontown stuff, but yeah. Whew. Alatheridae is my sister. I will be surprised if you don't get the stuff that is from our shared childhood. Let's see. So Daniel Fortescue is a skeleton. And that is kind of, a failed hero as well. Yeah, he literally just removes his own arm and then hits people with it. It left a big impression on me. I only played it when I was very young, didn't get to play it again. I remembered Sir Daniel Fortescue and his bone arm. Dave says, damn, I had thought arm, but I remember him with a sword so often. So in the cover art, he has a sword, I believe, and you can pick up lots of weapons. But his default weapon, if you aren't using anything else, is just his arm. Maliki says, I had to reload. I missed 2 questions, but 1 question would have been wrong. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Story Dragon says, just guess the stranger option. Boots was the strangest option to me. You know what? That's not a bad method. Tulis is very armed. Alright. In Tamsin Weir's Locked Tomb series, Gideon is known as the 9th because she is the 9th of her name, she belongs to the 9th house, 9 is her lucky number, or she is on her 9th life. So, this is a very, much more recent sort of question. But I know this is a very popular Necromancer series. So we'll see how people do that. Sati says, ooh, good books. Absolutely. I haven't read Nona yet, but I will. Fluffy says it's another book I've read recently. Excellent. So, the answer. She belongs to the 9th house. The 9th house, which is the cult of the 9th planet. I understand why people guess she's on her 9th life. I threw that one in to be mean. So I'm sorry that I got so many answers. All right, we're moving on. Next question. The original Tomb Raider was released in, this one's super mean, 1999, 1994, 1996, or 2000. This is the original Tomb Raider video game. I will not provide any further information. Coral says the year of the triangular chest. Absolutely. The year of the extremely square butt. Alatheridae says I'm going to be wrong on this and cry about it. Maybe. The correct answer is 1996. The original Tomb Raider was a game released on the PlayStation 1. Well, just on the PlayStation. Yeah. This came up in trivia for me recently. So it was burned into my memory, but I did fact check it. It is 1996. Joe says I knew it and got it wrong. Come on, Joe. Alatheridae says the square butt is where she stores her weapons. That's what we always said growing up. Alatharin and I played an awful lot of the original Tomb Raider games. Zatnosk is leaving. It was lovely to have you here, Zati. Thank you so much for coming by. It sounds like a lovely evening. Alright, Dave says my score is plummeting with the last few. That was a mean question. It's just numbers. I assume a lot of people are just like, I don't know, I'll just click a number. Quarrel says I have access to memories of 1996, so I just knew this one. That's amazing. Maliki says, V, can you give us 30 from when you say next question and you actually trigger it? Nope, I can't see the question until I click next question. I really did try to... This is the maximum amount of time for answering that it would allow me. 30 seconds. I was hoping for a minute, but it wouldn't let me. So I'm really sorry about that if it's not very good for mobile. Oh, to say next question. Okay, next question. We're just going to take a moment. But wait with the clicking. I'm waiting. I'm hoping that'll be okay. So you can open the screen. Alright, I'll try and bear that in mind. Joe says Andy hadn't experienced Tomb Raider. I clicked the year before. Are you mean Andy from Toy Story? Is that what you're referencing, Joe? Alright, I'm gonna click next question. There we go. In the 1999 film The Mummy, Imhotep is resurrected because Evelyn reads from the Book of the Dead, Jonathan releases Imhotep's spirit from the canopic jars, Rick disrespects Imhotep's remains, or Benny reads from the Book of Amun-Ra. Faraday and Rowan both like the idea of waiting a bit longer. Yeah, I'll try and bear that in mind. I'm sorry it's not giving you enough time. I'm sort of at the mercy of the extension. Joe says I didn't read them all. Sorry. Okay. The answer is Evelyn reads from the Book of the Dead. The canopic jars contain the remains of Anaxunamun, Imhotep's lover. Rick does disrespect Imhotep's remains, but it doesn't mean anything at the time. And Benny does not read from the Book of Amun-Ra. So, any fans of the 1999 The Mummy here? Man, I love that film. I was very scared of it. I feel like it was formative to the creation of Toontown. Maliki says, what? I was right? Yo, you got it. Rowan says, based entirely on my viewing of the 1930s Mummy? Oh, wow. That's cool. Okay, I'm gonna click next question in about 30 seconds. So, be ready. Just gonna leave up my little timer for a second. Maliki says I've watched it so many times. It's very rewatchable. I can't believe how rewatchable it is. Alright, everyone. Next question. In The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, how do the hobbits escape the Barrow-wights? They are rescued by Tom Bombadil. Merry uses a Westerness blade. The disguised Aragorn drives them back with fire. Or Fatty Lumpkin distracts the Barrow-wights. Dave says The Mummy, also known as By Awakening the movie. One of many, but yes, absolutely. Fatty Lumpkin crying faces, Joe. Absolutely, absolutely. This is a book-only question. So that's fun. You cannot answer this if you've seen only the films. Reveal answer. They are rescued by Tom Bombadil, who does not appear in the films. Tom Bombadil is an ancient being who just likes to sing rhymes, and he can just command the Barrow-wights to leave the hobbits alone, pretty much. Fatty Lumpkin also doesn't really appear in the films. Yeah. That would be Tom Bombadil's pony. um, Merry does use a Westerness blade, but is a Westerness blade got from the Barrow Wights, and he uses it on the Witch King of Angmar to help Éowyn kill the Witch King. And the disguised Aragorn drives back Ringwraiths with fire, not the Barrow Wights. So Rowan says, I thought Tom Bombadil rescued them from Old Man Willow. I think both. Yeah, it's both. Tom Bombadil does a ton of stuff. And like a load of stuff, but is not present because he's considered too childish, and also it's not very good for the pacing of a film. Or the book, I suppose. So there you are. I'm going to click next question very soon. So be ready. Tula says Tom Bombadillo, Tolkien's answer to Ned Flanders from The Simpsons. Absolutely. I suspect that Tom Bombadil is not actually that nice and kind. I don't know the deep lore, but I get that sense. But then I guess that's kind of true of Ned Flanders, so maybe. Quirrell says Tom Bombadil could have saved the world single-handedly if he felt like it. Absolutely. Dave says, I adore the reasons J.R.R. added Tom in. I remember being very upset that he wasn't in it. Okay, I'm clicking. The secret organization behind the outbreaks in the Resident Evil series is the Raccoon City Council, STARS, Umbrella Corporation, or the Family. Alatheridae, if you don't get this right, I will have mocking rights. Joe says Skynet. I can't believe I didn't put that in there. Malachi says a question I knew. Love that. Alatheridae says, I don't think I will. You are so into Resident Evil. How would you get it wrong? Oh. The correct answer is the Umbrella Corporation. Which is an absolutely amazing name for a villainous organization. Yeah, Umbrella Corp, behind the law of every bad thing that happens in this universe, it comes back to them and their T-virus and their many experiments. So there you go. Tula says GLaDOS. I love it. Alatheridae says didn't get it wrong. No brag, no brag. Tirana says my ex used to work for a company with an umbrella for a logo and was also a huge fan of Resident Evil. There were many jokes. That's very strange. Imagine working for a company with the same name as, or the same logo as yeah, Resident Evil. All right, in about 30 seconds, I will go to the next question. Be warned. Alatheridae says, I thought there was a trick. No trick. I've learned that some of the best ways to handle trivia is just don't try and trick people, because they will trick themselves and think it's too obvious. Jabal says, damn, I should have guessed. I would have got that right, but I didn't know Umbrella was Resident Evil. And wasn't sure if it was from another series and been put in to be a red herring. Those are all organizations from the Resident Evil series. Alatheridae says, I nearly did, my dude. You nearly tricked yourself. All right, we're on to the next question. Divination through bones is known as osteomancy, ostomancy, scapulomancy, or marrowmancy. I'm sorry, this is a mean one for sure. Joe says two are the same. Two are almost the same, sort of. All right. Our answer is loading. Malachi says I expected to find another word there, so definitely tripped me up on this one. Well, the correct answer, everyone, is actually scapulomancy. I looked this up because I couldn't remember the name. And it's really fascinating stuff. So I just chose a bunch of other bone-related stuff for the mancies. Scapulomancy. Typically the art of either butchering an animal and examining its shoulder bone, or throwing that said shoulder bone into a fire and examining how it cracks in order to divine the future. It's really cool, really old, and actually divination through bones, and particularly scapulomancy, is actually kind of developed all around the world. I think the fire version, known as pyromancy, if you'll believe it, is most common in sort of China. But yeah, scapulomancy is the term used. So I learned something making this question. I do not blame anyone who didn't get it. The two who did get it, well done. Oh, hey, next question. I'm so sorry. Go. In the Toontown short story Making Friends, Gretel is trying to raise her dead cat, speak to her grandmother's spirit, befriend the local children, or reanimate a dead human. I'm sorry, mobile users. I wasn't thinking. So, I don't know if anyone is going to get this. Some people have read Making Friends, but it's one of the short stories, so I don't think it's as well read. Joe says, don't worry about it. It's just some fun. Oh, well, I'm still sorry. Tila says, Making Friends was such a good book. Thank you. Maliki says, I feel like it's in the name. It sort of is. So, the answer is reanimate a dead human. So, on the cover, you see an undead cat for Making Friends. The cat is already there. That's Brush, the undead cat. Her grandmother's spirit does come up. Her grandmother does come up, but her grandmother is dead. She doesn't speak to her spirit. The local children hate Gretel because Gretel raises the dead, which is very scary. Gretel is going to the graveyard to try and raise a dead child to be her friend. It's quite sad. And she ends up making a friend along the way. So, yeah, that's Making Friends. Joe, you got it wrong? Joe, you got it wrong? Come on, Joe. Joe is my partner. This is unacceptable. Rowan says Gretel is trying to make a friend by reanimating her. Exactly. All right, I will click next question in about 30 seconds. Be warned. We're on question 13. There are 30 questions. Story Dragon says, now I have a negative score. There's a lot more questions. We're not even halfway through. And don't forget, you can choose not to answer if you aren't sure. It will have 0 effect on your score. It will not go up or down. Where do we see our overall scores? I'm not sure. There's like a leaderboard, I think, on the screen, maybe? All right, we're going next question. Crow says, wow, this is a marathon. I wasn't expecting it to take this long to discuss. I'm so sorry. I'll move more quickly. In Dragon Age Inquisition, which of these companions has the necromancer specialization? Another gamer question. Dorian Pavus, Cole, Solus, or Vivian de Fair? Quirrell says, I'm on desktop and I can see my score in the top left of the question box. Ah, there we go. Alatheridae says, not answering is too safe. Can't wait that patiently. Yeah, I think at this rate we'll be finished by about past, maybe a bit earlier. All right. And the answer is Dorian Pavus. Yeah, all of these companions use magic. And Cole, I think Cole doesn't actually use magic, but is a spirit. The only necromancer is Dorian. And he comes from a culture that, like, has they're dead running around in tombs. So, Quirrell says, I only knew it wasn't Solus. That's fair enough. All right. Calmly hi. Calmly says, wow, I have minus 30,000 points. All right. I'm going to press next question very soon. Be ready. Jabal says Viv is the battle mage, I think. Solus is Fade. Dorian, thus the necromancer. Yeah. I think Solus's specialization... Was it actually healing? But it's all a bit misleading. I can't remember. Yeah. Story Dragon says secret twist, the one with the least points win. A lot of the quizzes I've taken part in have like the spoon. You get a wooden spoon as a prize if your team was the worst. Superior says Solus' specialty is being a smug git. Absolutely true. He was one of my favorite characters though. Alright, next question. Question 15. Resurrectionists were cannibals who sought immortality through consuming the dead, people who exhumed the bodies of the recently dead, doctors and anatomists who illegally studied dead bodies, or a London cult known for the practice of human sacrifice. This is resurrectionists. Tula says the last question is worth 1 million points. Maybe it is. I don't know how they score these points. Jabals is going to take a guess on this one and cross fingers. Story Dragons is a hard one. It is a hard one. I've been a little tricksy with it. So the answer was actually people who exhumed the bodies of the recently dead, though they frequently exhumed them for the doctors and anatomists who needed the cadavers to study for medical research. It was the grave robbers themselves who were the resurrectionists. So that was a mean and nasty trick by yours truly. The race to the bottom, I assume, is getting fierce. Rowan says, couldn't resist guessing and got it wrong like everyone else. Conley's at minus 43,000. That's beautiful. All right, I'm going to click next question really soon. Get ready. Maliki says, guess late, lose less points. Is that true? That's a good strategy. It's true. Wow. Maliki with the big strategies going on. Okay, next question. In the Toontown series, which of these is an example of a minion? Dichotomy, Misery, Lazarin, or the Lich? Joseph took too long. Oh no. Story Dragon says, we are just learning new things. One of my favorite things about quizzes and trivia is that you come away knowing more even if you do badly, which is why I enjoy quizzes and trivia even though I am very bad at it. It's definitely more fun to play trivia than to create a quiz, but it's very fun to be hosting a quiz. I'm very much enjoying this. So we're revealing the answer. The correct answer is Misery. Dichotomy is alive. Lazarin is eventually dies and is raised again as Wandering Larry. But Lazarin was the living man, not Larry himself. The Lich is not technically undead. He is a necromancer who has, through age, become indistinguishable from undead. So the correct answer was Misery, who is just a zombie and was described, I think, in my reading as a house minion. So, yes, there we go. Nearly everyone got that right, too. Maliki says Larry not being there was great. I thought if I put Larry there, everyone would get it. I couldn't do it. Calmly says, I'm fine with losing is when everyone acts like a smug git about it and tells me I'm bad for not knowing or laughs at me. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think in general, I think I'll try to make sure that if I say anything like that, it's definitely meant in a good spirit, but I'll try and avoid that. Let's see. I'll click next question soon. Be ready. I definitely don't like people... I don't know why anyone would say that you're bad for not knowing. That seems very unfair. Definitely, we like our quizzes to be fun. If anyone here thinks that someone's crossed a line with teasing or something like that, just, you know, feel free to say, and we will just... and everyone will know and respect that, I'm sure. Alatheridae says being wrong here is part of the fun. Absolutely. All right, next question. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, which of these is a necromantic spell? Darkness, Unseen Servant, Commune, or Gentle Repose? I think this is another mean one, to be honest. Authority says, at least for me it is, but also despairing if it's the one I wanted to know. I kind of enjoy the despair of getting it wrong when I'm like, oh, I should have known that. I'm a fool. Maliki says I shouldn't have guessed. Oh, no. All right, the answer's loading. Jabal says, I literally just played a D&D game as a wizard and I have no clue here. Well, you don't have to pay attention to what the schools of wizardry are most of the time. So, reveal the answer. The correct answer is Gentle Repose. Gentle Repose is a spell in which you prevent a corpse from decaying or decomposing. You perfectly preserve it. Darkness is, I believe it's a, evocation spell, which is very unexpected. Unseen Servant is a conjuration spell. And Commune is a divination spell. So this was another tricky one. Maliki says, what does repose even mean? It means sort of like rest? Jabal says it's rest. Yes, it's rest. I'm going to say that more confidently now. Jabal knows. All right, I'm going to click next question very soon. Be ready. Calmly says darkness being evocation would make sense. I mean, it sort of does, but it's also sort of... I feel like it's not intuitive. I don't know. Spells. Who knew? Alatheridae, did you get it right? That's great. All right, next question, everybody. In Garth Nix's The Old Kingdom series, which of these bells wakes the dead? Saraneth, Mosriel, Astariel, or Kebeth? I was obsessed with these books, and frankly, I still am. Did anyone read Terciel and Eleanor, which came out recently? Joe says I failed to resist guessing. Joe, there's no way you know it. There is zero chance. So, revealing the answer. The correct answer is Mosriel, which only one person got right. Saraneth is the bell of binding. Mosriel is the waker. Astariel, the sorrowful, sends both the ringer and the hearer deeper into death. And Kebeth is the walker. So, yes, the correct answer is Mosriel. This is like a really... I could have done it, but probably not in 30 seconds, to be honest with you. Rowan says need more Toontown questions. Yeah. All right. I'm going to click next question very soon. Be ready. Alatheridae, no! I thought if anyone would get that, it would be you. Alatheridae says I thought it was Kebeth because it barks. Kebeth... but the dog is Kebeth, the walker, because dogs love to walk. Kebeth is one I always remember. Astariel is one I always remember. I remember Saraneth because it's the Alporson's favorite. Yeah, I like I said, I would have had to process of elimination that. So it was tough. Next question. In traditional tarot designs, which of the major arcana features a skeleton? The Hanged Man, the Moon, the Hierophant or Death? Quirrell says, I've never heard of books or authors, so I sat that one out. That is wise and patient. No points were lost. Maliki says, tricky. Is it tricky? Or did you trick yourself? So, in the traditional kind of Rider-Waite style designs, which have kind of influenced basically all of modern tarot, the Death card is represented by the Grim Reaper or a skeleton riding a horse. Everyone who picked something else, I'm so sorry. I spent a while thinking, is this too easy? And then I thought to myself, no, I would talk myself out of this, absolutely. And maybe someone else will talk themselves out of it as well. Yeah. It's a really tough one. And if you don't know tarot, I think it would be nearly impossible. Because you just would have no frame of reference. Maliki says, I went with the Hanged Man. That's what I thought most people would go with. And indeed, a lot of people did. Jabal says, it is at times frustrating me that so often my best strategy is to do nothing here rather than risk guessing. That is tough. You can always put your answers in chat, what you would have answered in chat afterwards if you don't guess, so we'll know what you would have guessed. All right, I'm going to click the next question soon. Be ready. Rowan says, I waited an extra 10 seconds before taking the obvious and correct answer. I was thinking Reaper. Like, I absolutely knew this one, but sometimes Reapers are skeletons. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. It's so easy to trick yourself with stuff like this. I trick myself so often. I find it so hard to answer stuff. Next question. In World of Warcraft, the playable character type known as undead are also known as forgotten, forlorn, forsworn, or forsaken. I'm really sorry. This is like top 3 meanest questions in this quiz. Quirrell says, forsooth. Joe says, Jubal, it will be worth it when you win. True, true. When you only have negative 10,000 points and you're king of the score. Maliki says, I mained undead. If I screw this up, I lose all my points. Oh no! I shouldn't have made it so... I made them all very similar. The correct answer is Forsaken. The undead are known as the Forsaken. They are a playable character type in World of Warcraft. They're very cool. They live in the Undercity. They got bones sticking out of their skin. Excellent undead. Any game that lets you play undead, that's cool. More games should do that. A lot of people got that right. This is a World of Warcraft heavy group. Rowan says, I played World of Warcraft for like a total of 2 hours and 1 night and I still knew this one. That's amazing. Coral says, roses are grey, violets are grey. I'm dead and colorblind. Yep. All right, I'm going to click next question very soon. Rowan says, everybody talks about this game. You can't escape it. It's so true. I knew a lot about this before I played it for the first time, which was in 2020. So, Alatheride says, I hate WoW, but I got it by guessing. The power of hate. Alatheride and I were Guild Wars kids. We couldn't afford a monthly subscription, so we got Guild Wars, which was free to play. Well, you bought it and it had no subscription. It was subscription free. And Alatheride decided that we therefore had a rivalry with World of Warcraft. I didn't feel like that. I felt like I wanted to play World of Warcraft, but... Calmly says, I know nothing of MMOs really. Okay, I'm gonna click next question soon. Quirrell says, we played WoW a bit back in the day, never hit the level cap. Me either! I played loads in 2020 and I still haven't ever hit the level cap. I didn't mostly do leveling things. Next question. Fluffy, hello! In the Toontown series, a Lich is a powerful cursed minion, a dead necromancer, an ancient necromancer, or a servant of Morin? Fluffy says, in time to continue the quiz, I see. Nice. Yeah, I mean, the quiz, when we finish the quiz, we will have finished the stream, pretty much. I expect we'll be wrapping up in the next 10-15 minutes. Rowan says, yay, a Toontown question. Well, now you have to get it right, because you said you could. Quirrell says, a lich is the worst thing that is ever likely to happen to you. I quite agree. The correct answer is an ancient necromancer. I think I actually revealed the answer when I answered a previous question. Liches are necromancers that have aged so far and used so much of the craft that they have lost their essential personhood and resemble undead, but they are not actually undead themselves. They have never died. All right, I'm gonna click next question soon. Be ready. Maliki says, me and my boyfriend at the time bought Guild Wars Collector's Edition and World of Warcraft at the same time. Oh, that's fun! Tula says, I think stream froze for me. Is it frozen for anyone else, or can you... you should be able to see my dragon bouncing and the chat moving. Try refreshing or closing your app if you're on mobile. Working for Quirrell? Okay, so it's probably at your end, Tula, I'm afraid. Extra bouncy! Okay, I'm gonna click next question in about 10 seconds. Be ready. All right. A famous necromancer from the Elder Scrolls series is Tiber Septim, Azura, the Wolf Queen, or Baron Zaya. I would be so good at this quiz that is entirely formed from my own brain. The only quiz I would ever pass. Except maybe that bone divination question. Joe says, I've taken a big swing on that guess. Why would you do that? Okay. The answer is... No one's got it right. It is the Wolf Queen. Tiber Septim is the original emperor of Cyrodiil. Azura is the Daedric prince of the Dawn and Dusk. Baron Zaya is the Dunmer queen who became part of the Empire. The Wolf Queen, Potima Septim, is a famous necromancer. And I believe in Skyrim, you interrupt a ritual to bring her back to life. Joe says, I was hoping for an Emperor Necromancer. I'm sorry. Yeah, calmly, it's not an indie game at all. It's as big as they get. Although, when I was playing Morrowind, it was a much smaller fandom, for sure. Alright, I'm gonna click next question soon. Maliki says, no, I was joking about Azura because we talked about Guild Wars and I was thinking about Asura. Ah. Fluffy says, I still need to play much of the Elder Scrolls. I mean, as far as big games go, there's a lot to love. Especially, I think the further back you go, the better they are. My favorite is 3, Morrowind. But I've played a little bit of Arena and it's amazing. Rowan says, my mother wrote some of the books in Elder Scrolls. The unofficial biographies of Baron Zaya? And that's how you knew it was in Baron Zaya? That's amazing! I've read all of those! That's so cool! Alright, I'm gonna click next question, but just like, that's very cool. Which of these is a traditional folkloric vampiric feature? Obsessive counting, fangs, autonomous flight, or fungi-infested graves? This question took me a really long time to formulate. Like, a really long time. There are vampires in a lot of different folklore. Rowan says my mother has way better nerd cred than I do. That's so cool, though. This is a difficult question. So, the correct answer is obsessive counting. This is obviously, there's not really any specifically common traits across folklore, but something that often came up in very old vampiric stories was the idea that you could distract them by making them count, which is also referenced, weirdly, by the Count from Sesame Street. Yes, that Muppet. Fangs are a relatively modern addition, popularized by Bram Stoker's Dracula. Autonomous flight is not a thing, really. And fungi-infested graves, I just threw that in there. You'll find grave-related in some kind of Eastern European sort of folklore traditions. There was a thing where if an animal crossed your grave, particularly a cat, that could lead to someone rising again as a vampire. Only really the obsessive counting is a properly old one. Rowan says, I went with fangs and then I remembered that obsessive counting really is a traditional one. Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, that's that. So I'll go to the next question soon. Be ready. Joe, be nice to Jelly. Be nice to Alatheride. That's not actually being enforced in any way. Alatheride and Joe can sort things out if Joe crosses the line. Joe being my partner and Alatheride being my sister, they're good friends. Alright, next question. In Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, the home of the Doyle household is known as Hill House, High Place, Rose House, or Red Manor. This is quite a tough one. And it's not actually necromancy related. This is more fungi related. So more related to the beautiful Decay. But you know what? Mushrooms are very necromantic anyway, in my opinion. So totally counts. I absolutely loved this book. And I highly recommend it if anyone hasn't read it. It's terrifying, though. Absolutely terrifying. Badger, says Squirrel. So, the answer is High Place. High Place being the home of the racist old white family living in Mexico at the time of the book. I don't want to say too much about it because I feel like with only one answer there, maybe a lot of people haven't read this book. Do read it if you like Gothic horror. It's high on Gothic and high on horror. It's really, really dark. But it's very, very good. I'm gonna click next question soon. Be ready. Maliki says, okay, I think the winner should be whoever's closest to 0. So positive and negative. We'll do some fun workings out when we get the score. We're on question 24. We're nearly done. Okay, next question. Story Dragon says, Gothic good, horror oh no. Yeah. In Divinity Original Sin 2, undead are healed by rain, fire, poison, or necromancy. Fun fact, this is a game I have never finished, but I have played many times. It's very, very cool. Quirrell says that game did a lot of fun, weird stuff. It really did. One of the reasons I haven't got to Baldur's Gate yet is that it feels like it will lose some of that weirdness in order to do something more kind of mainstream. I know it's the same studio, but I just... I don't know. So, the correct answer there is poison. If you try and heal an undead, it hurts them. Only poison will heal an undead. Rain does not do anything to them. Fire, I think, hurts them a normal amount. And necromancy will hurt them as normal as well. Alatheride says, wait, I knew this, but I answered thinking it was a different game because I read badly. Oh, you still got it though? That's good. We played this game together, Alatheride. Baldur's Gate 3 is to DOS 2 as Skyrim is to Morrowind. Oh, no. I'm sure it's still amazing in that case, but it's clearly got the same pedigree, but it's more of a conventional build. See, that's kind of what I was expecting. Alright, I'm clicking next question soon. Conley says, speaking of Baldur's Gate 3, have you heard the outtakes of the narrator? They are both hilarious and very upsetting in some parts. I haven't played it yet, so I haven't tried to be spoiled, but that does sound fun. Joe says, you forgot my character. Very true. Joe's character was like an undead magical girl who was always causing poison rain to fall. In the actual play D&D web series Critical Role, the necromancer that adventuring party Vox Machina must defeat is Dr. Anna Ripley, Delilah Briarwood, Silas Briarwood, or Cassandra DeRollo. This is kind of a weird question because I think it's both niche and extremely mainstream. It's one of those weird, hyper-popular things, but web-only kind of. Joe says, oh no, you should know, Joe. Conley says, I think I might actually know this one. Get the points! Joe says, I answered quick. Oh. Tila says, I read that ages ago, but I can't remember the answer. Maliki says, was it in the animated series? It was. It was the main plot of the animated series. So. The correct answer is Delilah Briarwood, which everyone who answered got right. Delilah Briarwood and her husband, the vampire Silas Briarwood, are trying to bring back an evil necromancer god. Yeah. There's books, comics, obviously the actual play series, and an animated series. So there's a lot of options for where you could have encountered this. But if you didn't know it, that's completely fine. Rowan says, I only know it because I watched the animated series. That's a good way to get the story, to be honest. All right. I'm going to click next question soon. Conley says, yes, I knew it from season 3 of Critical Role, not the animated series, though. Oh, really? Yeah, I hadn't even thought, but yes, of course, that's a great way to have come to that answer. That's very relevant. Maliki says, I knew it was a Briarwood, but it took a while because I couldn't remember which Briarwood. See, I'm tricky like that sometimes. All right, next question. In the Toontown series, Rhee's only childhood friend was Anders the Skull, Wandering Larry, an undead rat, or Uster the Acolyte. Rhee's only childhood friend. Joe says no. Rowan says extremely tricksy. Coral says, I don't think I read far enough to know this one. That's okay, Coral. Rowan says, I got it right, though. We'll see. Maliki says, if it's not blank, I'm not playing anymore. All right, everyone. The correct answer is Wandering Larry. When Rhee was a child, she was the only child in Toontown, the first child born there before anyone else had migrated. Her only friend was Wandering Larry, the zombie. It wasn't until much later, in her later teens, that she met Uster. So, and it was a while before they considered each other friends. Rowan says Uster migrated as a teen. Quite right. Uster didn't come to Toontown until she was 14, I think. So, next question soon. Be ready. Crow says Larry is a good friend, though. Yes. Larry is a great friend. Maliki says you can't have a whole quiz where no answer is Larry. And they didn't even become friends until the end of book 1. Absolutely. I'm glad so many people got that right. It was a bit of a trick question, and people still got it right. Okay, next question. A church grim is traditionally a black dog, a skeletal horse, a small girl, or a white cat. What is a church grim? This is an absolutely wonderful piece of like folklore. I love church grims. Quarrel says there's all kinds of fun folklore around black dogs generally. Absolutely. And indeed, the correct answer is a black dog. There is an old superstition that the first person buried in a church graveyard will, their spirit will remain. And so to prevent that fate befalling a human, it was traditional to bury a dog in the graveyard instead to guard the bodies of those who go there. It ties into many other myths around black dogs. So yeah, black dog is meant to be a ghostly spirit that guards the graveyards. Some churches even had actual living black dogs that just lived there. Which I imagine would be very scary if you didn't expect them to physically be there. Alright, I'm going to move on to the next question soon. Be ready. Crow says, I know this one from Gunnercraig Court. Oh, okay. Halitherity says dogs are also common psychopomps. Yeah, I guess they kind of are. That's a good point. Malachi says church grim was definitely something I've never heard of. Ah, maybe it's more common in England. In England then. Alright, we're moving on. A Mary Lwyd is a Welsh custom where what is mounted on a pole and carried around? A horse skull, a flower wreath, a clay head, or a cow mask? A Mary Lwyd. Which I hope I have pronounced correctly, but I really may not have. Welsh friends, feel free to correct. Quirrell says, I think if I get this wrong, I get kicked out of Wales. Oh, I did worry that might be a bad side effect. Thirday says they used to kill dogs when their owners died for that reason, though, which is sad. That is sad. So the correct answer is a horse skull. Someone puts a horse skull on a pole. It's like a hobby horse kind of deal, but dead. They hide under a big sheet and travel around the village and have celebrations to bring in the new year or to celebrate Christmas. Or it's all kind of a little bit variable. It's very cool. Malachi says, I felt flower wreath was close to a Swedish tradition. Ah. Crow doesn't have to move. Yay! Malachi says, I went for horse skull late, though. Good. Nice. All right, the last question is coming up soon. Be ready. Story Dragon says that was the grimmest option, so I guessed that. I feel like a clay head is pretty grim, but that might just be because I've reread the Paladins series by T. Kingfisher recently, and the clay men are so gross. The smooth men, they have clay heads. All right, next question. What is the favorite activity of Wandering Larry from V.O. Corva's Toontown series? Is it running, eating brains, biting, or wandering? There we go. A Toontown question to end the quiz. Alatheridae says if I stop losing points suddenly, it is because I am munching on cookies. Story Dragon says, if I have this one wrong, oh no. Rowan says also Trixie, but I feel confident. Story Dragon says, I'm sure that I must have it right. We'll see. The correct answer is biting. Larry loves to bite. It is how he bonds with children. He is not great at running. He's never eaten any brains. He does wander, but it's mostly by accident. He loves to bite. It looks like nearly everyone got that right. Quill says, I remember him chewing and affectionately on people. I wasn't sure if that could be counted as his favorite. It is. He loves it. Rowan says, look, Larry wanders, but biting is his true love. Exactly. All right, let's have a look at the final results, everyone. Wow! In first place, we have the Nine-Tailed System with 342,101. No negative scores here on the scoreboard. Number 2 is Jabal Barker with nearly 300,000. Then Rowan with nearly 250,000 points. Alatheridae then in 4th with 209,000. In 5th place, we have Fluffy with 161,000 points. In 6th, we have Tiny Tula with 135,000 points. And in 7th, we have Oh No Joe with that was a big drop there, Joe. With 71,000 points. Well done to everyone who made it onto the scoreboard. I would love to hear the negative scores. Let's see. Firstly, let's see who's closest to 0. Joe has 71,000. Can anyone else get closer? Joe says I'm gonna tantrum. Don't tantrum on my stream, Joe. You can't see your scores now? Do you know roughly where it was last time you looked? Calmly has minus 124,000. Oh, wow. Rowan says I could have been second for sure if I could have resisted guessing more. But you beat out Joe? You beat out Joe by a lot, Rowan. Well done. Story Dragon says I am at 10th with 40,000. Oh, closer to 0. A lot closer to 0. Jabal says I could have caught up with Ninetales if I resisted guessing more. Sambians, I didn't even know you were here. What? I ranked 16 out of 16 with minus 200,000 points. Wow. This is not really in your wheelhouse. I would have thought you would have got good points on the video game questions. Please tell me, Sam, that you got the Tomb Raider question right. Maliki at 8th with 66,000. Ah. Calmly's 15th out of 16th. Maliki says I suggested closest to 0 when I was around 300 points. I love it. All right, well done, everyone. That was really, really fun. It is really... I've discovered a new love, which is hosting quizzes, particularly quizzes that are about things I like very much. Sam says I wasn't here for the Tomb Raider question. Oh, that'll be why your score's so low. Of course, it's much harder for people who came in when, or who came in late, or whose phones were causing them troubles, etc. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I'm glad that I had a lot of fun, and I hope that you had fun too, because it really did. It took me like 3 hours to get this quiz, like, made and set up. It took a really long time. Quite different in tone from a hide-and-seek book launch, but definitely still good, in my opinion. This is... you hear about book launches that are people, everyone's kind of in a pub having drinks. It's not for me. This is for me. Thank you all for being here. Of course, my new novel, The Beautiful Decay, the second book in the Toontown series, is out tomorrow, basically everywhere. Particularly online, in ebook and in paperback. So please tell your friends about this weird series about necromancers with a zombie called Wandering Larry. It's really exciting. It was so much fun that you're all here. Story Dragon says, could we maybe have the questions and answers somewhere? That would be lovely. I will post that on Fedi. I will get them written up and post them there tonight. Or tomorrow if I get too sleepy, but I'll try and do it tonight. Thank you all so much. And yeah, it comes out tomorrow. Thank you. I'm gonna go to my little end screen now. Goodbye, everyone.